So I've really got no room to work out here. Not much room to show you guys what's going on, but I'm making a podcast table. It's gonna have some things. You ever see these things online? The little fake amplifier things you hang up on the wall. You got little keychains that you would plug in when you get home. I would say one of the major brands on there or whatnot. It would look like a little amp. So I saw that and I was like, I think I can make something like that using some old broken stuff I've got laying around. And so I made this, and before I finished, I made a bunch of jacks and basically made a keychain out of old cut up guitar string and some jacks I drilled through. And so I got one of these on my keychain, and then you would just plug in. So before I finish this, really all it needs is paint, and then I would hang it up somewhere. I got to thinking about, like, what if you took a light jack and used it as an on-off switch? And so I did. So just a little side note about this project. This is two different projects. I had an idea for a light, and that's what this is basically. And then when upgrading my podcast studio, I ran into an issue of not having enough space and not finding a table that would fit all of my needs. So I decided to build one, and I didn't really have a house for the light. I just had an idea, so I decided to incorporate it into the table. I started drawing it out and thinking about what dimensions were going to be, what I might need. Some ideas are better than others. Sometimes we have ideas and we try to see them through, but they end up complicating things. This one was one of those ideas, the quick connect. It worked great for diagnosing and figuring out how to use the chips and wiring everything and where everything went. But then in the end, I've got a bunch of ends that can fall apart and fall off, and you need something solid. So this didn't really work, but I did what I had to make it work, like glue them together, tape them, solder them, whatever I needed to do. So just for future, probably won't be doing that. But yeah, you have these like weird ideas, like for the on and off switches. This is a separate idea other than the main idea, just to be able to, when I got to thinking about functionality, what control do you have? And I wanted to be able to leave the light strips on and turn off some of the LEDs in the front. So I incorporated a couple of extra switches in the back side of the front panel to be able to do that. And we have more parts that I thought might be necessary, and as I got into these, they very quickly grew. So this isn't a full part list. And then I thought about using the decal that I had. I had a decal, and then it ended up being too big for the plexiglass, so then I had to figure something else out, and custom stencils had to be ordered, but they were pretty cheap from Etsy. Here I'm just kind of in my head before the thing's built, thinking about what do I want, how do I want it to look. So I've got my second tier here. Here's the front panel. Got myself telling myself about where I want some of the lights to go. So here I do a rough sketch out of what I want the table to look like and where I want the lights underneath the first tier, underneath the second tier, the piece of light on the front, and all of that. So it's just kind of a very quick idea just to make sure I don't lose it. So here's some more early drawings of the idea and talking about hiding the direct LED. At first I thought maybe I'd put the panels on the side, but that's not a good idea because you need to get under there like a table, so those moved to the front. So that changed, but that's part of any idea. You kind of start off and it grows. And then inside the back panel, I talk about having some bracing and something to hold the electronics. We've got the tabletop. We've got a second tier for all of the equipment. We've got some panels to hide some electronics. And then we've got some 2x4s to frame some things out. So first we just sand and fill anything that needs to be filled, just to kind of help with some of the rough edges. You know, sometimes with cuts you get some things that splinter and peel off, and so you don't want that stuff to just be exposed to the touch. It kind of feels grody. So you put some fill on there, sand it down, and once you seal it, it should be pretty good. You know, it's never quite perfect when you're doing these things by hand, but I just want to fill in any noticeable gashes and holes and things, and then sand them all down. Do maybe a 80 to start and get all of these edges off, and then maybe 120 to kind of sand everything else down. And then once I get the fill in, then I come back with a 220 and give it all one last hurrah, and then I'll stain it. I'll show you more about that later. I got these two ripped. These will be, I'll shorten them a little bit, and these will be for the top tier. Doing these over here at 28. Alright. And you just make your line like that. Next we gotta chop some 2x4s for some frame. Alright, I've got everything cut and sanded and filled, and I'm just waiting for things to dry. Give it one last sand with some very fine sandpaper. Get everything ready for drilling and then staining. Got the panels, we've got the frame, we've got the top tier, and got the tabletop. Here's where we're getting into a little more customization. We're gonna have this here as stabilization after I make my frames, and then in between it we're gonna have all the wires. That's where the light wires are gonna be run from the front to the back of the table. Just have to make some holes for running HDMI cables and power supply cables and stuff like that in the top, and probably in one of these, and then also for the surge protector in the back. And we've got some things to do for these panels for the lights. Okay, so now we're building our boxes. These are our frames where the electronics are going to be hidden. Got our holes drilled. This is the back of the top tier. This is the top tier. Hide wires. Here's the frame. Got our L brackets and our straight brackets, and got everything screwed in. And then we've just got some screws here waiting for the top, and we'll put some more in the long boards and get some more L brackets connecting this to the top. So normally I would wait till later on in the project once I know where everything goes and I've already drilled holes and things. But it's a nice day and I gotta go to work, and it's supposed to rain later, and I don't have any room to do these bigger boards, so I'm doing some staining now. Staining everything that I can. This will be next. I cut a couple more boards because I messed up and I put the 2x4s in a frame like this. They were supposed to go in the middle, and then the panels were going to go over to hide the wires. Now I gotta create another box out for that. Now I've got the box out on the tabletop, and then I've got the inside channel for the electronics, and the chisel out for the wires to flow through. Everything's being glued and screwed. Okay, so now I've put the front panels on, got the front panels fitted up drilled and screwed. Same over here. Those will come back off and get stained. Now I'm just figuring out how to set up. Oh, and also I screwed in the top, filled that in. Now I am figuring out how the top tier is going to lay. Probably something along these lines. So I'm going to have to drill these in, make my holes for the bolts. I got some stain on here, waiting for it to dry. Got the wires run through. Got some blocks put in to support because it was a little weak in the middle there. Got the shelf put in for the electronics and the channel for the wires. Okay, so now I've got wires run, I've got everything put together, tongue oil on the finish here on both, waiting for everything to dry. Here's what I'm thinking for the LEDs. This is for the front panel. This is obviously not the piece I'm going to be using, but this would be the template or a jig basically to drill the holes again for where I want it to be on the actual front of the thing. So here's the here's the wires for the LEDs. Depending upon what color, I might not use all of these leads. You really only need 2 of them if you're going for one color, but because they're RGB, you've got the other 2. But yeah, this is going to be a mess if I don't figure out an easy way to do this. This kind of simplifies things, but again, and I'd like to make everything quick connect. But even this is still, there's room for these things to fall off. I can glue them, I guess. We'll see. Depending upon the color, I might just wire them together like this. Putting them together and then only using 2 wires instead of this mess. And I also made a little jig here. Alright, so now I got it in the house. I got top coat of tongue oil drying. Got a paint lined because of some things that were going on there. All of this is pretty much done. Now I've got to get the wires started, and that's what I'm doing here. So there's going to be lights under here. These are just some 5-volt LED strips. So then I'll just feed these back in through. And gotta figure out the placement for some of these other ones. Okay, now I've got these metal pieces put in place for holding the microphone swing arms. I've got the wire caps, the management ports put in, forget what they're called. Got the lights on and secured in and ready to go there. I've also got lights here ready to go. And I've got lights around the table all stapled in and fed where they're gonna go. And I've got the power supply back here glued in place and routed where it's gonna come out over here. Now we're wiring in some of the chips. Got the lights going. Okay, next I took a little gift card and some of these white LEDs. They're real small. They're smaller than my other LEDs. They don't really fit in all the other holes that I'm going to be drilling, so I got to do something special. And I'm putting them up in here. There'll be a couple LEDs per area, and because this is such a tight fit, I gotta feed them up through here. So I've got those drilled. I've got the cards painted so they don't look like gift cards, and just waiting for them to dry, and then I'll wire them together. Okay, so now I've got stain on the back panel again. Cut these holes for the power supply, and made this little insert for over here to just make it look nice. And now I added a little vent for the electronics because there's going to be a few chips in there. Wanted to make sure there was some airflow so it didn't get too hot. Alright, now we've got some screen mesh covering over the vent holes. I used some wood glue and some Elmer's glue to just kind of hold it in place while everything dries up. And I taped off the panels just like I did with the top and painted the black. So waiting on that to dry, and then I'll put another tung oil finish and be done with those. Okay, so I know some of these steps are probably a little redundant and you don't really need to know them, but just for the purpose of showing you how much detail goes into all this stuff, here's a little block here. This is going to keep the power strip from coming any further back. And then we've got some a little hook here to hold the power strip in place going outwards that way to keep it from moving around so much. Alright, so here is the first panel for the light that I'm making. This is going to go on the front of the table in the front panel. What I did here was just tape the edges and spray paint, and now I'm just waiting to dry. Over here is the second panel. This will go over top probably and help diffuse the light a little bit, and then I'll use this one to draw on, hopefully. Okay, so this is kind of what the idea is. Got some LEDs, gonna hide them behind these little strips. It's gonna light these panels up. Kinda act like a dry erase board, light up back. So here's the idea. Some LEDs behind these borders to kind of hide the directness of them so it's not so directly bright. So I've got a clear one that I'm gonna maybe write on, and then I've got a frosted one, and then I've got a frosted one with the border on it. So between all of these, there's just enough to kind of dissipate the light a little bit, and we'll see how that looks when it's all together. Here's the original color of the wood, and here it is with a tan. I used a little bit of golden pecan. And now I used that template that I made, and I drilled all my holes. Got the regular size LEDs, the RGBs, and we've got the white LEDs, and we've got the jacks, and then we've got the standoff screw holes. And here's all the holes. Okay, here's some of my color markers. I'm not sure exactly if this is how it's going to line up, but basically all of these that aren't marked are going to be white. This is for the standoffs. Then we've got red, aqua, green, blue, yeah, and then white. So that's 5. It's a tight fit, but I got my jacks all wired up. 23 white LEDs wired in. Cut in a little hole for my on-off switches to be able to turn off some of the lights. As you get going in projects, sometimes things aren't what you wanted. These stencils were too big, so I had to get some smaller stencils. So got the smaller stencil sprayed on. I still need to put Pete Alice on the bottom. Sometimes when you get into projects, I have to shift, especially in things you haven't done before. Like I've built tables, but this idea is new, so it might take some finagling. So now I got all the wiring in place for the front. It just needs to be connected to the front panel. Just a little update. The quick connect idea was a bad idea. It was good to help get everything wired up in place and how it should go, but for the long term, some other form would need to be figured out. But it works. I know it looks awful, but there's a lot going on. Gotta be careful drilling the holes, especially in the cold. It gets brittle, chipped off, so that's $4 down the drain and however much in spray paint. Drilled a hole in the back panel and popped in one of these little guys. I'll feed my wires for the top lights in through there. Got a little bit back here for the chips left, but I finished the front lights. A little bit left for the switches, but I added some bracing here for the jacks for when you pull the jacks out. Alright, I finally got the back on. All the electronics in there. Let's plug her in, make sure everything works. Just a little test. Alright. There we go. Put these little switches here to have independent control of 3 of the front lights. Here's the little vent holes. You can see that there's power in there. We've got some LEDs here, some running lights, more lights under there. Little example of how detail matters. Little cutout, fit back in here, make everything nice. You know, when you've got plugs that you're not wiring, you've got to find ways to be creative, and I'd say this is a good one. Okay, now the front's on. So the idea is each of these jacks corresponds with a color on this front. You can take out each of these colors, and then they also take out each one of them unplugs a strip. And then also you can flip this. There's the back switches that I was talking about. If you flip those, you can also just individually turn off the LEDs, the green ones, the red ones, and the aqua ones. Only, and not the strips. And then the white one, the white is all the white and all the white running lights. And then the one that doesn't have an off switch separate from the main jack plug is the blue. And now, because this is such light, thin burst, movements seem to affect a little bit of the light, because all the LEDs are just set in there. So that's an unfortunate side effect of being able to plug and unplug. But that's basically the idea in a nutshell. Having these jacks act as basically on-off switches for each of the color schemes and the light strips. I cut some little pieces of shoe so that I could use around the top tier. I didn't like how it was sitting once I put it all together, so I'm gonna hide the seams that you see, and got that stuff stained and just waiting for it to dry so I can do the other finishing processes. Alright, so now I've got some shoe all the way around, and it's filled and it's stained and it's tongue oiled and it's also clear coated, and then it's just glued on, filled, and then one more little clear coat after that, just seal in the fill where it needed, just a couple little spots. So that pretty much completes the table. And I got smaller bolts because the other ones stuck out a little too far. They were about down to here. You can sometimes rub on this here. So figured get some little final touch-ups. This is a functional table. You know, it's not just for the lights. I also did things for the setup. For instance, this is raised because I'm going to be talking across from someone right here, and if someone were to spill something, then at least all of the expensive equipment is out of the way. There's a charger back there for someone if they want it, and there's lights all around that will help light that up for them. So it's thought out, and then there's places to run the wires just to kind of tidy things up a little bit because sometimes it gets obnoxious. I mean, if you look back here, there's still a lot of wires, and so to kind of hide all of that a little bit better, it helps. We've got red, we've got green, got blue, got aqua, and we've got white. And so there are the 5 jacks, 5 lights, and each of these jacks is also correlated to lights. So the white one is only the white. So that's the white running lights, that's the white here. That's all this one, okay? So then we've got this one. This one is aqua. And the aqua turns off the 4 lights that were underneath things in the back here. The blue turns off the main strip around here and the blue. Okay. The green, when you pull the green, there's a blue strip back here that goes out. I guess maybe I didn't show you that one. So let's show you that one real fast. So there's the green. And it's dull, but there's the blue. And then the red will do these underneath lights here. Okay? So, but that's not all. Then, once you have everything in, say you want to customize things. Say you want some of these lights on, but you don't want some of these lights on. All these lights are controlled by a little controller. But these lights, I also have other switches. I've got these 3 switches back here. So with that, I'm able to turn off the aqua, the green, and the red. And when I do that, all of your other lights are still on. Just affects this here. And that was to give me a little bit of more customality in this light. Because this light is for holidays or for anything. So if I want to just have the white, for instance, or maybe I just want to have red, white, and blue. So now I've got red, white, and blue. Or maybe it's Christmas time. Maybe I don't want blue at all. Maybe I want red, white, and green. So there's plenty of options. So now I've got my lighting strip, and I've got my electronic strip for my actual recording stuff for the podcast. So then I've got my little light under here. Got my strip around here. These are all podcast strip lights. I've got extra lights too. I've got a whole extra little strip here. If I plug this one in, these are related to these lights here. And this light here. And this light here. But those are for music. That's for when I do DJ battles and other things. So the main lights, when you flip the main switch, we've got all of these here, right? And so I'm going to turn these to blue. Now we've got these blue strips on the inside. We've got these white LEDs as running lights. We've got these blue strips on the outside. you've got the four separate little strips that all go to one strip. And then in the front here, here's where the main light gets put into play. So this was the idea. I had two different ideas. I had one idea for the podcast table. I needed something to be able to raise my electronics off of the table. I needed something wide enough to make people feel comfortable sitting next to one another. And some room. Here we are, set up. Thoughts are fluid, and they can lead you into an idea. And if you don't write that idea down, then it can disappear. But all of that is very still interchangeable, and it's just very in the clouds, especially the thoughts. Very much in the clouds, and you can take that thought and form it into an idea, and it can still never happen. So when I have ideas from the thoughts, I tend to sketch them out, write them down very quickly, just to kind of have an idea of what my thoughts were, a written idea. And then I can come back and I can look at it, and I can gauge where was I at with this idea. Is this a viable idea? And sometimes, things in that idea maybe don't get utilized or get left, but the overall whole of the idea might stay around. And then you go from the writing to actually creating the idea. And so then it starts to solidify. Then you start to get what it actually is. And from that, you can go back and compare your original thought to your finished idea and see how close you were. And that's what I like about these sketches that I just showed. You have these ideas, you sketch them out, and they may never come to fruition sometimes. And then other times you put in work and you know what you're doing to create it, and you have the money for the material, and you get lucky. And so here's thought, idea, product. Don't get me wrong, there's other processes before you get a product. All kinds of testing and stuff, development, but for the most part, that's the steps that I take. I got ideas on how I might clean it up in the future. Feel free to drop a line. I'd love to hear what you guys got to say. Check out more of my builds, videos, podcasts, and music at peacem.com.